Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Music Talk Tuesday, and today I'm going to be briefly discussing the um, whole question of um, are albums losing ground? In other words, our albums are in particular music albums not being seen as, I guess you could say, something that people really consider when it comes to really their music selection, at least nowadays. Um, and I think, and partially that is true because of the rise of the internet um, and music videos that you can access through the internet. So, a lot of the times now, music is kind of being used as a um, means to just generate one particular song or various songs that end up becoming popular. And not necessarily focusing on generating a collection of songs that are just by one specific artist. Um, and, you know, really all that it takes for someone to really get a song is just to download it. And a lot of the times, relevancy is based upon just which songs are the most popular. And then, even though you have an album of all these other songs, they're not gonna generate the same amount of maybe praise or or amount of attention as uh, the hit songs that end up being played on the radio and end up getting music videos made for it and etc. And I think that's almost always been true, largely with, um, in particular, uh, music itself, which, I think a lot of people just listen to the one particular song, and that song is, or songs are the ones that really capture them. And then there's all of these other songs that just kind of get put on the bus, or they're not really considered as well thought out or as well executed, and so they're kind of shoved. And I think largely, even though albums were initially popular before we had this internet that allowed us to just kind of purchase the songs individually, there was the sense that people just kind of paid attention to the songs that were played on the radio and that were given a certain amount of recognition and praise, so to speak. So you can almost say that the album has lost its has been losing its ground since its existence. um, but there's also something that's also very important to note, and that is the fact that the album is very important to, I think, in particular musicians, because they like the idea of making all these various different songs and putting them all together into one kind of piece, um, and making that piece an album, so to speak, because it's a way of kind of just it kind of creates a sort of identity and kind of a brand that the artist is putting themselves under, you know, and largely that doesn't come through one song or two songs, but through 15 songs, which is largely, I think, um, the amount of songs that are, at least the average, I think, amount of songs that are on an album. Um, but even then, there are just, and there are things too that, people might even say, like, hey, these songs that don't get really played too much on the radio are actually genuinely good and offer something interesting as well. And so I think the whole idea uh, that the album is therefore irrelevant, I think, is not true, because it has some substance, it has some purpose. Um, but I think the reason why it has lost more ground is only because of the fact that now we can just selectively purchase and listen to whatever songs we want to listen to instead of having to purchase a whole album, and being stuck with that album. Um, and that's the unfortunate thing. But on the one hand, I think it's still good that albums are here and that they still kind of exist. I just think that they have probably lost more ground than they've initially had. But I think the whole idea of albums were largely, you know, based, I think, just from a general public sense. Like if you're not really an in-depth music, I guess fan, then I don't think the albums have a same amount of significance as those who generally study and listen to music on a very in-depth basis. So again, obviously the album is important and it is a good way to kind of establish yourself, even if those songs in particular don't get played as much as the other ones do. Or even if one album is not as successful as another. The point is to just kind of bring yourself out there and bring out sort of what you present and see how the audience ultimately responds. And I think that's really what albums really are supposed to really cultivate. It's just this idea of who is this particular person, and then throughout that album, people will sort of pick and choose the best ones, or the ones that they consider to be the most catchy, most memorable, most fun to listen to. But yeah, I think that's really, though, ultimately all I can say about this. I mean, it's very fascinating. I mean, I think the album is and will be an important part of music, as well as its history and its present and future. But obviously, I think throughout the years, and with the ability to gain more access to individualized songs, I think the album, although it will always have an importance, I think, to the artists and musicians and people who genuinely are very interested in music in particular, it will still kind of be for, I guess you could say, the masses largely, just kind of pick and choose and not necessarily about the album. So it's losing ground as far as being very a very, I guess you could say, profitable item, unlike the years before, where it was able to retain a huge amount of significance because we didn't see the rise of the internet being able to really gain access to music through those means. So yeah, I think that's really ultimately all I can say about this topic. But again, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care.